Manchester United are easily one of the biggest clubs in the history of world football and one of the biggest footballing brands in the entire world. They have a very rich tradition, culture, and history, and we're here to tell you all about that today. But you might be surprised by the number of times we use the word relegation in this video. United were founded in 1878, but they didn't play their first ever official football game until 1880. They lost that game 6-0 to Bolton's reserve team, and back then their colours were green and gold, not the red and white you're used to right now. But that's not even the craziest part of the beginning of this great club. You see, when the club was formed, they had one of the longest names in the history of football club names. They went by Newton Heath Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway Football Club. No way that name was going to last. Of course, they changed the name, but before they even got the chance to, the club was very nearly dissolved. In 1902, they found themselves neck-deep in debt, which led to them being served a winding-up order. But Harry Stafford found businessmen who were willing to invest and help run the club, and it was these men who changed the name from that mouthful to Manchester United Football Club in April 1902. They secured promotion to the First Division in 1906, and in 1908 they won the league title, becoming the first of many. They followed that up with their first FA Cup win in 1909, before moving to Old Trafford in 1910, and the following year they won the league again. And guys, if you're enjoying this video so far, please give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on more content like this. Anyway, after the First World War, Man United became an up-and-down club. They got relegated in 1922 and came back up in 25, only to get relegated again in 1931. But fast forward to 1945, after the Second World War, United hired a man named Matt Busby as first-team coach. This man turned the life of the club around. He helped United finish second in the First Division for 3 straight seasons between 1947 and 1949. And in between, he won the FA Cup. Then in 1952, they finally laid their hands on another league title, which was their first in 41 years. And from then on, Manchester United did not look back. In 1956 and 1957, Busby won back-to-back league titles with a team that had an average age of 22 years. Because of how young they were, that squad earned the nickname Busby Babes. Now, winning the league in 1957 meant that they got a ticket to the European Cup that year. The Football League tried to stop them from participating, just like they did with Chelsea the previous year, but United were adamant. So, they went on to take part in the European Cup, making them the first ever English club to do so. In their first season in Europe, they were exceptional, beating Anderlecht 10-0, their biggest ever victory to date, and going all the way to their semi-final, where they lost to eventual champions Real Madrid. Manchester United were enjoying life under Busby, dominating England and doing well in Europe. But then, they were hit with the most unfortunate tragedy in 1958, the Munich Air Disaster. They were heading back to England after a European Cup quarter-final game against Red Star Belgrade, and while trying to take off after refueling in Munich, the aircraft carrying Man United players, journalists and officials crashed, instantly killing 23 people on board, 8 of whom were players. A lot of others were injured in the crash, including Bobby Charlton and Matt Busby, which forced Jimmy Murphy to take over as interim coach of what was a makeshift team. With that team, he managed to reach the FA Cup final, but they lost to Bolton. Because of the air disaster, UEFA invited Man United to compete in the European Cup in the 1958-59 season, but the Football League stopped them from going because they hadn't qualified. Anyway, Busby came back and was able to rebuild the team from the ground up. He signed players like Dennis Law and Pat Crerand, and brought up guys like George Best from the Youth Academy. Together, they were able to win the FA Cup in 1963, their first trophy since the disaster 5 years prior. That victory ushered in a new era of United dominance, as they would go on to win the league in 1965 and 67. And in 1968, they won the European Cup, becoming the first ever English club to achieve that feat. That year, George Best won the Ballon d'Or, and Bobby Charlton, who'd won it in 1966 after leading England to their first ever World Cup trophy, was a close second. If you think this was a good time for United, just watch out for the 80s and 90s. A year after United won the European Cup, Busby resigned, and just like the case with Sir Alex Ferguson, United struggled to find the best replacement. At first, he was replaced by Wilf McGuinness, but Wilf was so bad the club had to go and beg Busby to come back. Then, in 1971, Franco Farrell was hired, but his tenure only lasted a year and a half before he was replaced by Tommy Docherty, who produced one of the biggest scandals in the club's history. We'll tell you all about that later, but first, you should know that at the time Docherty was hired, Man United were fighting relegation. Docherty helped save them from relegation in 1972, but 2 years later, he couldn't repeat his endeavours as they dropped down to the second division. At this time, United had lost their three best players, Dennis Law, Bobby Charlton and George Best, so you know they were in serious trouble. But in 1975, Docherty brought United back to the first division, and then in 77, they won the FA Cup, beating fierce rivals Liverpool in the final. But guess what? Not long after, Docherty was sacked. Strange, right? They didn't sack him after he was relegated or even after he lost the FA Cup final, but after he won a trophy they sent him packing. Why? Well, here's the thing. His dismissal wasn't performance related. Nah, not at all. Tommy Docherty was sacked after it came to light that he was having an affair with the wife of the club's physiotherapist. Crazy, right? Anyway, Docherty was replaced by Dave Sexton. Interesting name choice for a new coach following a sex scandal, but okay. Sadly for Sexton, he wasn't able to win any trophies, so he was sacked in 1981 and was replaced by Ron Atkinson, who came and won the FA Cup in 1983 and 85. But he was sacked in 1986 after he left United facing possible relegation. Now, guess who replaced Ron Atkinson? Of course it's who you're thinking of, the man himself, Sir Alex Ferguson. Well, then he didn't have a Sir in front of his name, yet. But it wasn't all rosy at the beginning. Just a little after he was hired, Fergie was very nearly sacked after finishing 11th in the league table. He was only saved by the FA Cup final win in 1990, and that victory ushered United into their greatest era ever. In 1991, they won their first ever UEFA Cup Winners' Cup, going on to win the European Super Cup, and won their first ever League Cup in 1992. That same year, Manchester United became one of the founding members of the new Premier League, and they then went on to become the first ever winners of the title. That, by the way, was their first league title in 26 years. Then, in 1994, they managed to successfully defend their title, doing that for the first time in 37 years. They also won the FA Cup that year, completing the domestic double for the first time in the history of the club. In 1996, they did the double again, becoming the first ever English club to do the double twice. In 1997, they won the league again. United won 4 of the first 5 Premier League titles, but the best was still to come. In 1998, Arsenal beat them to the league, but United came back with a bang the following season, going on to do something no English team had ever done before. They won the UEFA Champions League, Premier League and the FA Cup to become the first club from England to complete the European treble. The Champions League final against Bayern Munich went down in history as one of the greatest comebacks in football history. United were 1-0 down for almost the entire game, but substitutes Teddy Sheringham and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer turned things completely around with goals in the 91st and 93rd minutes. It was that summer that Fergie got knighted. Alex Ferguson became Sir Alex Ferguson. Under Sir Alex Ferguson, United continued to enjoy a lot of success as they won the league in 2000 and 2001 to become the first team to win the Premier League 3 times in a row, and only the 4th team to do that in the history of English football. In the first 10 years of the Premier League, United won the title 7 times, but they suffered a bit of a dip in the mid-2000s, failing to win the league or the Champions League between 2004 and 2006. However, they came back with a bang, winning it again in 2007 and successfully defending it in 2008 along with another Champions League trophy. That year, they also went on to become the first English club to win the FIFA Club World Cup. For his performances for United that year, Cristiano Ronaldo won the Ballon d'Or, making him the last Premier League player to win the award to date. In 2009, United won the Premier League again, making them the first club to three-peat the Premier League twice. They also won the League Cup that season and nearly wrapped the season up perfectly by winning back-to-back Champions Leagues, but they lost the final to Barcelona. That summer, they sold Cristiano Ronaldo to Real Madrid for a world record fee. But even without their star man, United continued to dominate. They won the Premier League in 2011 and got to the Champions League final, but they lost again to Barcelona. But it was still a happy year at Old Trafford, as that Premier League title was a record-breaking one. It was United's 19th league win, making them the English club with the most league titles in history. They would go on to extend that number to 20 with Premier League success in 2013. That particular victory was bittersweet because it marked the end of an era. It was Sir Alex Ferguson's last trophy as coach of Manchester United, as he retired at the end of the 2012-13 season. Now, Fergie not only retired as Man United's most successful manager ever, but he also retired as the most decorated manager in football history. Of course, after a prolonged successful spell under one manager, United were expected to experience a dip. But even with the anticipation, the entire world was stunned by what happened to this great club. Ferguson recommended his fellow Scotsman David Moyes to take over from him, and that earned Moyes the nickname The Chosen One, playing on Mourinho's nickname The Special One. But not long after he was hired, United fans began to wish the Chosen One was never chosen. He was poor in the league, and under him, they failed to secure Champions League qualification for the first time in 18 years. That season, United finished 7th in the Premier League table, their worst league finish in the history of the Premier League at the time. That meant that they also failed to qualify for the Europa League, making it the first time the club failed to qualify for European football in 24 years. Moyes was sacked just 10 months after he was hired and was replaced by Louis van Gaal. There was a lot of hope after Van Gaal was signed. That celebration between him and Van Persie at the 2014 World Cup had a lot of fans brimming with positivity, but he ended up not doing too well. He too failed to help United secure Champions League qualification in his second season, finishing 5th in the table. But at least he was able to win them the FA Cup. The Dutchman was sacked in 2016, and he was replaced by Jose Mourinho. In his first season at the club, Mourinho won the Community Shield, League Cup and the Europa League, so United thought they were back. As that was their first European trophy since 2008, so you can understand why they were very excited. And things continued to look up. Mourinho led United to a second-place finish in 2018, the highest the club had finished since they won the league in Fergie's last season. They also reached the FA Cup final that year, but they lost to Mourinho's former club, Chelsea. However, the season after was a disaster. Mourinho lost the dressing room and started losing games. Sitting 6th in the table halfway into the season, he was sacked and replaced by 1999 Champions League final hero Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Ole's tenure was a story of being so close, yet so far. The fans thought the football was better and most of them had faith in him, but he wasn't able to win any silverware. They reached the Europa League final in 2021, their first European final since 2017. But they lost 11-10 on penalties to Villarreal, which made it 4 straight seasons without a trophy for the English Giants. They were so close, so it hurt a little more. Anyway, that summer, United welcomed back one of their biggest legends, Cristiano Ronaldo. He brought so much hope to the fans, and they thought they would finally be able to compete again. But sadly, that was not the case. Later that year, Ole was sacked and was replaced by Ralf Rangnick, who was only there until the end of the season when Erik ten Hag was appointed. The Dutchman's first season was so here and there. Not long into his reign, Ten Hag fell out with Ronaldo, which forced the Portuguese to leave the club, moving to Saudi Arabia to join Al Nassr halfway into the 2022-23 season. However, that season, Ten Hag led United to League Cup success to end their longest trophy drought in 40 years. But that same year, they suffered their heaviest defeat, losing 7-0 to bitter rivals Liverpool. You see, here and there. They also got to the FA Cup final, but they lost to Man City. On one hand, you might want to commend them for reaching 2 finals in one season, but in context, it was not so good. You see, United had a chance to protect their legacy by stopping their City rivals from becoming the only other English team to complete a European treble. But they could not, and City went on to do the treble. And the next season followed the same theme. This time around, United beat City to win the FA Cup, but they also finished 8th in the league table with a negative goal difference, the club's worst ever Premier League finish. Erik ten Hag was very nearly sacked after that year, but the club decided to trust him for at least another season. That hasn't started so well, but let's see if he can redeem himself and restore Man United to old glory. But regardless of these recent failings, Manchester United remain one of the biggest clubs in the world. What are your thoughts on United? Will they get back to their dominant selves in the near future? Let us know in the comments and give the video a like if you enjoyed it.